Hey guys, it's Logan here with Hydra572, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Kershaw Echelon. Now, as I was doing my final research on this blade, I realized that it has recently been discontinued by Kershaw, and that's a bummer because it is a really nice knife. However, there are still a couple hundred of them out there at different retailers and distributors, so if you act fast, you can probably still pick one up. Let's go ahead and get started with intended usage. I see this as an EDC knife that has a limited application in emergency defensive. I certainly would use it to defend myself if I had to, but this really excels as an EDC utility cutter. Moving on to pricing, seeing as they've been discontinued, they're going for about $45 on Blade HQ and $44 on eBay. People are trying to move these blades. The blade profile, that nice drop point that you guys saw. It is a pretty unique take on a drop point, especially with those thumb studs styled the way they are. The tip is a pretty thin, acute tip. I believe that you could break it off if you tried to be abusive, but as it stands, I think it will do good tip cutting and not be too prone to breakage. The belly on the blade is pretty great. Like I said, this excels as an EDC knife. Most of that blade is usable in any kind of slicing cut that you might need to perform. Moving on to the steel. This is Sandvik, the 14C28 steel. That is a more budget-oriented steel. I think about it as being near the same price range as AUS 8. I think it is a little bit better performing than AUS 8. I've only had a couple of knives with this steel, but for a budget steel, the retention has been pretty dang good, and the sharpening has been easy. I'd say another comparable steel, it's a little bit harder than VG10 is what I would say from my experience. Machine's a little bit harder, but also retains a little bit better. Moving on to the grind, as you guys see there, we have the subtle partial hollow grind. I think that is a very attractive grind on this knife, and it works pretty dang good for your EDC cutting tasks as well. Moving on to deployment. From the factory, this is a spring-assisted knife, as you guys have seen from me deploying mine. I de-assisted it. The reason for that is that when the knife is in the closed position, the torsion bar actually has a little bit of area to move, and so it makes a little bit of a rattle noise. In pocket, it's not all that noticeable, but when you've got the knife just out in hand, it is pretty noticeable. And it bugged me and I wanted to play with the knife, so I de-assisted it, and it still deploys pretty dang good. Which is not to say that the spring assist was bad. If you're not the type of person who cares about something like that rattling noise, well, it's a little bit worse than the Clash, and a little bit better than my 0350. It came out pretty hard. The Clash is still the king of hard deploying spring assists in my mind, but this knife did alright in and of itself. The lock is an inset liner lock. That means that you've got the liner down inside the handle scale and that it's not the full length and width of the handle scale. Really well done in this blade. There's a little bit of play now after I de-assisted it. I took it apart multiple times. From the factory, there was absolutely no blade play, and you guys know I'm a stickler for that, and it lived up to my standards, and this is a less expensive knife than some others that do have blade play, like my 0350. In all honesty, it's got a little bit of side-to-side blade play. This puppy had nothing, and even after I took it apart 4 or 5 times, it's still very, very minimal, very acceptable. Moving on to the handle, that material that you guys see there is on-dyed G10. That's what G10 looks like in its natural form. I guess natural as far as you can go with a synthetic composite. But that cool semi-translucent, sort of light gray, little bit of green in there, I think that it's very attractive, especially when you're mixing it in with a sea of knives that look like this. The liners are stainless steel. The ergonomics are very, very good. I like the feel of this knife in hand. Moving on to the jimping, there is none. We have a smooth thumb ramp there, and it actually feels really good. It's a nice transition, feels good in hand, feels good on your thumb. This is overall a very well done handle. The clip, as you guys see there, is that bent over deep carry style clip. It is 3-way reversible. If you want tip down carry for your left side, you are boned, I suppose, just because of the pivot, but any other position that you'd want to carry it in, an affordance is made for you to do so. The presentation, I think, is really nice, like I mentioned, especially when you're mixing it into a collection like most people have that is mostly black handles and satin polishes. I think a knife like this really stands out. I think the undyed G10 really pops. I like that it's semi-translucent. When it had the torsion bar in there, you could see it operate, and it's a very attractive blade style, especially with the thumb studs being a little bit non-standard. I thought that maybe it was adjustable, you could slide it back and forth. It is not. That is a fixed thumb stud. That cutout is just a stylization. I think that it looks very good. I think this blade is very attractive, and it really pops. Anything that stands out just a little bit from the norm, especially in the knife realm, can really have a chance to pop. Moving on to quality is really good, minus the rattle. I do think of that as a slight quality issue. I'm not sure what about how they machined the various holes for the torsion bar would cause that rattle to occur, but it did bug me enough that I de-assisted the knife. I think most people would say it's not an issue. But otherwise, the finish was good. The edge that it came with was superb. The hardware has been just fine so far, so quality was very nice. Moving on to value, I would say pretty good, but not excellent. It is more of a budget-minded steel, and typically that price was a little bit higher. Now that it's being closed out, it is cheaper, and this steel seems to make a whole lot more sense. I paid a little bit more for this knife. I paid up around $50, I want to say. Moving into competition, well, for around $50, there's really a lot of competition for a small EDC knife this size. Some that we've seen already. You have the Clash for a little bit cheaper. Have Spyderco Native for a little bit more. I think the Native is a very interesting comparison for this blade. Interesting but very different ergonomics, very well ergonomically designed on both, and great EDC blades. Both there. I would have a hard time telling you which one that you should choose. The Native, obviously S30V, slightly better steel. Who am I kidding with slightly? That is a flat-out better steel. Two very cool knives for similar prices, and I love having both of these blades. I think they are very interesting competition for each other. But as I said, the $50 EDC blade market is really wide open at this point in time. Anything that you would like, you can really look for. If you like a little bit smaller, if you'd like a different handle style, a different blade profile, it's really wide open in terms of competition. I think this blade is an excellent addition to anyone's collection, simply because it makes a great EDC utility cutter and it looks a little bit different from the norm. I am pretty bummed about Kershaw discontinuing this blade, but supplies don't seem to be dwindling just yet, which is why I'm choosing to review it now. If you were so inclined, you could go out and find one still. Obviously, it's been a pretty positive review overall. I'm going to give this blade a pass. With this great grind, good steel, good edge design, I've been getting great EDC cutting performance out of this blade throughout my testing and usage. I've been glad to have it with me, and it will continue to get rotated through my carry for as long as I am lucky to have it. We will finish up with stats. Overall length, I'm aware that those are still called specs. I don't know why I haven't changed that on my sheet, but we'll go with the stats. The overall length, 7 1/8 inch. Blade length, 3 inches. Handle length, 5 1/8 inch. Blade thickness was listed as 0.12, which is real close to an eighth. Not a very thick stock, pretty thin knife overall. The weight comes in at 3 ounces. It is a very light knife. Very comfortable in hand, good slicing performance, good cutting performance, just an overall pleasure of a knife to review. I am bummed about Kershaw discontinuing this blade. If you have a chance, go ahead and pick one up. I'm hoping that Kershaw will revive this knife sometime in the near future. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more of the same.